I'm here with Bill Ammer. He's the owner of Ammer Consulting, and I'm here to interview him about his job. So, what's your current job, and tell me a little bit about what you do.
Um, I operate Ammer Consulting, and we do a number of things here. Um, Mostly, we do testing of assistive technologies. So that would be wheelchairs or walkers or rollators, anything, any kind of a health aid that you would use, out in the world or at your home. We test that kind of stuff. Um, in order for things to be paid for through insurance, if it's a medical device, you have to have it registered with the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and they issue what's called a 510K. So they give you a code number that classifies whatever it is you want to pay for on insurance. And to get that certification, you have to have testing done. And I do most of that testing.
Okay. And what does a typical day for you look like?
um, the fun thing about my job is that my days are very seldom
Mhm.
typical. Um, I do mostly the testing, but I'm also involved in some other projects. I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Pittsburgh. And so
Mm.
sometimes my duties take me down there. But for the most part, I'm here at the shop. Um, and so usually that's setting up test procedures and, following through with them, getting the test results. And then the worst part of the job is all the paperwork done, writing the reports. Um, Most of the standards require that you take a picture of the test setup. So, for instance, when I test a wheelchair, there's probably over 100 pictures for each one because you have to take a picture of each test setup. And those all have to be included in the report. So they all have to be cataloged. So, I can generally finish a chair in about 2 weeks, and it'll probably take me 2 or 3 days to put all the pictures together, get
Mm.
all the results into the test report, and get that put together and then sent out. So, yeah, that's pretty much a typical day. Every once in a while, I might have to make a fixture for a specific wheelchair that will help me get it tested. And sometimes those fixtures take me all day to make. Sometimes it's a 5 minute fix. So that makes my days really non-typical.
Mm.
So some days I can just breeze right through a wheelchair, and other days it'll be like an hour of setup for 5 seconds of testing. And so that's what my days are like.
All right, so if the paperwork is your least favorite, what would you say is your favorite part about your job?
Um, I think probably the people that I'm involved with.
Mm.
Um, the very fun part is that, the test standards that we use are from ISO, the International Standards Organization. And I sit on several of those committees. And since they're international standards, the people that I work with to write those are, all over the world. For instance, this morning I had a meeting for some standards. We're rewriting a standard for um, things like rollators or walkers.
Mm.
Um, and so there were several people from Japan. There were two from Korea. We had a couple of guys from South America. I was the lone American. We had a guy on there from Belgium, and so I deal with people all around the world and have friends all around the world who are involved in the same thing that I am. And it's really fun to, get to know those people and recognize their customs. And the language is always a barrier. And so that's probably the most fun part of my job is the international community that I'm a part of.
Right. And how do you like get to this job? Like what previous jobs did you have, like college education?
Well, my degree is in industrial engineering, and I got that degree from Penn State University here in Pennsylvania. Um, and I had a number of corporate type jobs over the years. I've worked for big steel, I've worked for big oil. Um, I worked for a company that manufactured automotive add-on equipment. Did one that was very large manufacturing stuff, oil well drilling equipment. So
Mm.
everything was like super huge and powerful and stuff like that. And that was a fun job. But for a while in my life, I gave up the engineering thing and actually did architectural and contracting work and built houses.
Oh,
I just kind of walked away from everything professionally. Still used my engineering degree a lot. Um, and then later on decided that I wanted to get back into the engineering field. And a friend of mine suggested that I look into a job at the University of Pittsburgh. And that job involved testing wheelchairs and writing standards. And I've been doing that now for almost 30 years.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
And how did you know you wanted to go into that major, like coming out of high school into college?
You know, I looked at the different types of engineering, and at the time, industrial engineering back then was a little different than it is now. Um, a lot of industrial engineering back then was time standards, being able to develop um, for a specific job to develop a time related uh, standard or procedure. Um, and I always enjoyed that kind of stuff. I also had a lot of fun with math and science. And so that particular engineering degree, at least the one that I took, had all those things in it. And so I was really interested in that. And as it turns out, the industrial engineering program that I went through um, had a lot of different facets to it. It had, I think there were about a dozen more credits required for that
Mm.
particular bachelor's degree than even the other, like mechanical engineering or chemical engineering. And I got introduced to a lot of different things. I got introduced to, I had a welding course in college. I had a forging course. Um, I took courses in industrial automation, and I had all those different introductions into all these different facets of engineering. And so I'm always thankful that I chose that major.
Mm. And in college, is there anything you really love doing, or maybe you could say something you wish you had done?
Oh, wow. I had I think the fun part about my college career was I had one professor for three different courses.
Mm.
Um, and his name was Emery N. Score, and his middle name also started with an E, so we always called him Triple E. Um, and he was a really incredible teacher, um, and he taught us how to look at problems. And so I think when I was introduced to situations where I had to take a problem and break it down into bite-sized pieces, um, he was really good at teaching that, and it's really helped me throughout my entire life.
Hmm.
Even when I wasn't doing engineering work, when I was building houses, it's a large project, and you just have to take it one little piece at a time and come up with the proper sequence. And so I think that's probably what I like most about college.
And like in college or like right after college, what was your first like job or internship or something along those lines?
Um, well, when I went to college, we didn't do internships.
Yeah.
And so my first job out of college was for a steel company,
Hmm.
um, and it was Armco Steel, which was about 30 miles north of Pittsburgh, in a little town called Butler, Pennsylvania. And there were two very large uh, manufacturing facilities in Butler, Pennsylvania. One of them was Armco Steel, and they employed about 5,000 people at the time. And the other one was Pullman Standard, and they made railroad cars, and they employed almost the same amount of people there. So this one little town had these two huge businesses. Um, and so Armco Steel was a specialty steel manufacturer, a lot of stainless steels and high alloy steels. And we actually used to be referred to as the jewelry shop
Hmm.
because we made all these very special steels, um, stuff that you couldn't find anywhere else from any other steel manufacturer. And it was a real good learning process for me.
And do you think that's what like a typical entry job looks like?
Yeah, I think so. As a young industrial engineer, um, the the company that I worked for had these what they called incentive programs. So, based on how your department did at the end of a month, there were actually bonuses issued
Hmm.
based on your performance. And in order to determine that performance, you have to go out and study each job and determine, okay, what are they supposed to get done on an average day? And a method to some metric to measure that and say, okay, this month they did 110%, the month before maybe they did 115, and they would get bonuses based on that. So we used to go out into the plant and we would time study somebody. And what a time study is, um, you take a clipboard and
Hmm.
you have an actual stopwatch right on the clipboard and you record everything that a person does for an entire day.
Oh.
And, and you might time study them for a week. And then you have to go back and let's say one of his tasks is you know loading a machine or something like that. So you have to go back through all those time studies and find all the instances where he loaded that machine, calculate all the time, and then find an average. So you can imagine that at the end of a day, just a day, you would maybe have a dozen pages of entries
Hmm.
um, of how long they took. And of course, back then there were no computers to do all that. So you had to summarize all that yourself. So you'd be going through 60 or 70 pages of stuff looking for every instance where he loaded that machine. And then you'd have to, tally all those. It was really painstaking work.
Hmm.
Um, but it taught you about job processes. Back then, they even had classes that you
Hmm.
had to attend where you would judge um, whether what percentage of maximum a person was working at. So, for instance, if just for walking, you know, you'd you'd say, well, it took him 10 seconds or, 10 seconds to walk from here to there. But you'd also have to classify whether he was walking at 50% or 100%. And
Hmm.
so you would have to normalize all those times. It was really an involved process back then. And as the youngest in the department, when I went in, I got all the fun jobs. So um, I actually had to time study a forklift driver,
Oh,
and I wasn't allowed to ride on the forklift. So everywhere that he drove, I walked, and I time studied that guy for a week. So I was really beat at the end of the day, following a forklift all the way around the plant. So yeah, it was interesting stuff.
yeah. And what like traits or skills do you think are kind of looked for new hires or going into a first job?
Um, Somebody who can problem solve,
Mhm.
look at an overall problem and come up with a way to break it down into smaller bites. Um, Somebody who's really good at math. A lot of what I do has, there's a heavy math background, some physics. Um, when we're testing a wheelchair, we want to know how fast it'll go. Um, we also want to know for a powered chair,
Mhm.
how far can you go on a set of batteries? And so we have instrumentation that allows us to determine how much energy we've used and then come up with a calculation that will um, extrapolate those numbers so that you know how far it'll go on a charge of batteries, um, stopping distances, and how well does it maneuver on a slope? Is
Mhm.
it, you know, it might be stable on level ground, but if you try and go down a hill and stop at the bottom of the hill, is it going to tip over? Um, so there's a lot of that involved in it, and just taking precise measurements of things and using test equipment. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I think the main one is the problem solving.
And would you have any like parting advice for someone pursuing a career in STEM?
Um, take lots of math.
Mhm.
Um, Nothing helps me more out during the day than solving equations and solving for an unknown. I I don't use a lot of real heavy math. Like I'm not using calculus a lot. Um, Minor, but just your basic equations like you know time, speed, and distance, um, weight, um, calculations that involve dimensions and angles and things like that. Learning how to measure things precisely
Mm.
is a good one, and patience. So, sometimes
Yeah.
I think I mentioned before, there are times when I spend an hour setting up for a test and the test only takes 10 or 15 seconds to do, so it can be frustrating at times, but it's always rewarding when you see your end results.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome.